Shanan, you said before the show that you believe more people need to be what you called productively petty.
Yes.
Okay, so walk me through what productive pettiness means.
Productively petty means that you are essentially setting yourself up for success instead of trying to control the other person. Oftentimes people run into what I would call in life reckless drivers. They're people who just behave badly, they get on their nerves, and ultimately we let those people have the stage and take our shine. And I say, don't. Find a way to help them trip over themselves. They're asking to do it, but don't push them. Don't put yourself in a negative situation. And I can give an example. Once I was on a job and I was passed over for a promotion by someone who took credit for work that we both did, but she took sole credit as if she hadn't called me for the idea for what we should do, and then she just scheduled a meeting. And I was fine with that because I actually don't like planning. Well, she was promoted over me, but what I ended up doing was going to the other managers who managed that position, asking them what I should do to show that I'm capable of doing it. And then I got permission from the manager who didn't promote me to actually do that on our accounts. So ultimately, she would run projects by me and see if she could get me to help. And I was like, I'm actually tied up doing this job for the manager. You'll have to ask him if he can spare me for that. Well, he couldn't because she was trying to get 10 new people. I was working on 60 to 100. And so the trade-off just wasn't worth it. Well, eventually she was leaving for various reasons, and I was promoted to another team, and the manager was upset because I wasn't gonna be on that team anymore. But I won because I got promoted. People were happy to see me promoted, and I didn't undermine her, but I also didn't help her take advantage of me anymore.
So how do you make sure that doesn't cross the line into real pettiness where people are just backbiting? Because that happens in office places too, and everybody who witnesses it hates it.
Yes.
And the person who does it typically is oblivious to the fact that they're doing it. So how do you keep from moving from productive pettiness or being productively petty to not being petty?
Check your intention. If you're aiming for revenge, something that's resentful, you're going to get into real pettiness. If you want to undercut someone, if your intention is you're just mad, you're going to get into real pettiness. My thought was, these people don't know what I'm capable of. Okay, I'll show them. I just wanted to show my abilities. And that's a noble goal no matter where you are. Mm-hmm. And as long as I was aiming towards that, I didn't have to be mean. I didn't have to undercut her. And I left it to someone else to decide if I should help her. But at that point, it would be known that I would be helping her. But I didn't have to make that call.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting. It's not a perspective I would have had we not had this conversation. But I agree with you, and I understand it because especially in the corporate setting, you know, there are people who will backstab and take credit, like this lady you're talking about.
Yes.
You know, she did that, and who knows where she ended up. But we have to protect ourselves, especially in the corporate world, to make sure that we have the opportunities that we feel that we're entitled to or deserve. Maybe entitled is not the right word, but that we deserve.
Positioning ourselves for the things that we want. Because, to quote a managing director I worked with while I was at my first job, this managing director said, no one gets what they deserve. They get what they're in the best position to negotiate for. So my thought is, how do I put myself in the best position to negotiate for what I want? And, you know, sometimes, you know, corporate backbiting, politics, etc., you may not be able to put yourself in that position there, but you can set yourself up with gaining skills, finding at least some type of positive from where you're at to go somewhere else and to take those skills, those abilities, that confidence with you.
Well, we're talking with Shanan Terale today on the Root of All Success podcast. And what she does is you're helping first generation wealthy people figure out how to manage that, right? And how to figure that. So how did you stumble into that? Because I don't know, but nobody just wakes up one day, hey, I'm going to work with wealthy people and figure out how to make them better. How did you get into what you're doing now?
So it actually happened because I worked in law and I had to navigate this situation for my family. My family was homeless when I was a kid because my dad's identity was stolen. So the odds of me reaching where I had access to, you wouldn't have bet on those odds. And in any way, shape or form, no matter where I've gone, whether it was going to my undergrad or my jobs that I ended up taking. So somebody who I worked with, she was actually planning to transition from working as an attorney into a stay-at-home wife, but wanted to do it in a way that felt meaningful for her. And she wanted to, manage her family money and also have a business. And we did the same job, but I was like, yeah, well, we can just do what our clients do. And she was just like, explain that. And so I did. And she was like, wait, I don't know this. So lawyers, we're implementing these things for clients all the time. And I just happened to have a way of explaining it, and she paid me to teach it. And then another group of people were trying to figure this out and how to navigate, because as one person told me, they learned more from me in 40 minutes than from working with their financial advisor for 4 years. And so being able to explain it in English to someone who's never seen it, it's not concrete, but making it concrete through examples that are relatable allows people to actually be in charge of their own destiny, captain their own ship. And that's what first generation high earners, professionals, and wealth builders are doing. But they don't have they don't have the system and structure in place already for them. They're putting that in place.
So you got your bachelor's degree, your undergrad degree in economics?
Yes.
And Latino studies.
Correct.
That's an interesting combo. You'll have to explain that in a moment. But so economics and Latino studies, and then you went and got your JD, right? And also your MBA from
Yes.
Northwestern. Was that an intent to operate as a lawyer, as an attorney in the financial spaces, or was there another driver behind that?
So when I was a kid, I told my parents I'd either be an artist or an attorney. And they were just like...
That's completely opposite, Shannon. You're going to have to pick one of these because there's different sides of your brains to work on this.
I work with both of my brains. So they were like, how do we get you to be the attorney? And I was like, well, if I win... If somehow or other I have a work put in a gallery, then I would consider myself an artist, so then I can be the attorney. Lo and behold, I won a children's art contest. They opened a children's art gallery, and the winning work they wanted to feature in the children's art gallery. So I was already an artist and decided to become an attorney.
What kind of art was it?
It was pop art, comic art, and essentially
like drawing, pen and ink.
It was pen, paint, ink. It was mixed media.
Okay.
But definitely painting, pen, drawing, and then I painted on top with not
Nice.
acrylics, but oil paints.
Nice.
And on a canvas. And ultimately, I remember I didn't even go to the award ceremony because I didn't think I'd win. And this girl had teased me about how her work was so much better. And she won the school competition. I won the county. So ultimately, my work was put in the Children's Art Gallery. And I painted something that was sentimental to me. It was my family at a restaurant. One of the few times of the year we went to a restaurant called Damon's, where they had trivia night on my birthday for the Super Bowl. And it was the last time the Super Bowl could ever be on my birthday. San Francisco 49ers won. So I painted that scene.
Nice. And that led you, like, you made the deal with your parents, like, if I won this, and then I'm going to be an attorney.
So then I'm going to be an attorney. So I knew I was going to be an attorney.
And how old were you?
This is third grade.
Holy crap, you figured this out at like you're 8 years old and you're figuring this stuff out.
Yeah, 7, 8. And then ultimately went to undergrad at Columbia, and I'd worked at a law office in my local town just to get a feel for it, and studied econ because I told my mom, I don't know anything about how money works, and I figure I might as well learn it. And I grew up on Salina. I grew up with Puerto Ricans and Dominicans, so I loved, like, I eat plantains. Like, I love maduros. I just grew up with certain cultures, and they were part of me. And I'm like, my parents taught me Black American studies. I'd learned American history. I wanted to focus on other cultures that I love. And so brought that in, just did what I was curious about.
Interesting. So at third grade, you win an art competition, you get an art show,
Yes.
and I'm going to be an attorney. So you end up going to Columbia, and you get econ and Latino studies. That's where that drives. It's just your culture, like the neighborhood you grew up in.
Yes.
Right. So economics and Latino studies, because you didn't really understand money. Then I guess, was it automatic? You just went from Columbia to Northwestern for law school?
I paused because by my senior year, I remember feeling exhausted, and everybody was worried because they're like, "Oh no, you'll never be the attorney if you don't go straight through." And I was just like, "No, I just need a stronger why to go through, and I want to learn how this money thing works." So went to a company called FactSet, which is what I call my tour de finance, and we worked with pretty much every financial professional on the street, and I had to help them do their jobs and look at data to do so.
Like, what do you mean financial professional? Are you talking accountants, bookkeepers, wealth managers? What are you talking about?
Talking wealth managers, private equity guys, bankers, in-house analysts who are doing the strategic acquisitions within companies, as well as your small office hedge funds, etc. So it was traders and sales, equity research. It was all the ways that people interact with the whole capital markets and company acquisition spaces.
Okay, so a lot of M&A stuff.
But not just.
Okay.
Because it was stocks. You figure there's bonds and offering memorandums going around. There's a lot of people who are analyzing this information and disseminating it to investors, and wealth managers who are managing people's money, and they're figuring out what they do
Right.
and what they need to do that job.
And so you've got your undergrad degree in economics.
Yes.
You're working here as what was your role?
So I was a consultant. Technically,
Okay.
I would help them with whatever they needed for their job and solve problems for them. And eventually I was promoted up into a sales position, which I don't know if I consider myself a true salesperson. I don't use gimmicks. I just solve people's problems. And because they would have a problem and they felt comfortable telling me what their problems were, I would find the solution and let them know honestly if we had it or if we could build it for them. And oftentimes, because, they liked me, they trusted that I would tell them the truth, because if we didn't have it, I'd let them know, and then it built up some good relationships, and ultimately helped me sell.
and then so you did that for approximately a year, and then you decided to get into law school at that point?
I worked for 8.
8 years.
Yes, I
You
even
said a
managed
little
a
pause.
team.
I was like, okay. I figured a year. 8 years.
Yeah, I managed.
You're a consultant in the financial
consulting
space.
and sales. So
All right.
I was promoted up. I managed a team there and helped even people on my team get into product development, so fintech space, because we had data, and we had to disseminate that data and make that user friendly, whatever the interface was, and then teach it to people. So teaching was something that was integrated into that role.
Nice. Okay, now.
Then I go to law school.
Then you go to, did you go to Northwestern to get the MBA first, or did the JD MBA come at the same time?
Same time.
So you did a dual track at the same time?
Yes.
Okay. How long did that take?
3 years.
Wow, you went pretty fast. Oh, I guess, though, at that point, you're very mature because you've had 8 years of experience in the real world. So you're not like you're 22 going into law school and you don't still know what the heck's going on. You've got 8 years of experience.
I did. And it was still something to do because it's a lot of work. I had to take extra classes and even summer school. And at the same time, I held a job while doing it. So it wasn't for the faint of heart.
Well, I tell you, I did. I never wanted to be an attorney as a kid. I didn't have my third grade. I was an artist too, though. We could have a conversation about that.
Yay!
But I never wanted to be an attorney until the senior high school. We did mock trial, and I was a defense attorney, and it was a blast. I had so much fun with it. And for a fleeting moment, maybe a few weeks, I thought, you know what? I think I'd like to do this. And then it just went away. It was just a moment. But now that I'm an entrepreneur and I have a decade and a half experience running companies and helping other people start and run companies and buying and selling companies. I'm like, man, I wish I had a law degree, because there's so much that I could do more for my clients if I had that understanding. I've got one client in particular that I helped him go through the sale of his business. Now we're working on acquiring another business. I'm helping him with that. And some of the conversations we've had, he's like, hey, I know you're my coach and there's this NDA, but like, is there a way that we can make sure this can't leave this room? I'm like, no, I don't have that. I'm not an attorney. He goes, how quick could you get that? How quick could you get your attorney, with a license or whatever? I'm like, I don't know. But I actually started looking into it. So Nashville School of Law is here. And I thought, well, how long would that take? And I started looking, it's like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to go back to school. But I'm glad you've got it. So how much has that helped you in your entrepreneurial career being an attorney?
Let's take a quick break to thank our amazing sponsors for making this podcast possible.
I finally got it. It's the brand new Relay Bank credit card. So check it out. I'm going to do a little unboxing for you so you can check this out. So here we go. Nice little case, kind of like the American Express. They're not playing. They're doing it right. Oh, look at this. There's a quote right inside. It says, "Success is having to worry about every damn thing in the world except money." Johnny Cash. That's pretty good. I've not heard that one. Oh, this is nice. A little thing on the back, up to 1.5% cash back, no annual fees or interest, 30-day billing cycle. And there it is. It's the Relay credit card. It's a Visa. So I'm not going to show you my number, but there it is. Look at that. Boom. Go check out Relay Bank. Go to therealjasonduncan.com/relay, and you could start banking with one of the best banks in the world.
Thanks for listening to our sponsors. Now, back to the show.
I think the subject matter, one, helps. Two, there are rules that I just know. So, for example, when I was filing for my trademark, well, sometimes the organizations that you partner with to do this will charge you sales tax on the filing fees. No, there's no filing. When you're paying a government organization and it's a pass-through fee, there's no sales tax. The states would have to get permission from the federal government to charge that, and they don't. So it's little things like that I know. Also, learning the tax code and having exposure. And granted, law school doesn't fully teach this. A lot of it was just learned in practice and navigating issues that come up when people are selling and buying companies, or in special situations, it's a hybrid situation where all the rules, it's not quite restructuring, it's not quite an equity transaction. There's a bit of nebulous area, and you're figuring out how to navigate these rules. That's kind of where I learned some of the rules of the road, and I get to teach the tax code, at least for a basic entrepreneurial perspective that people should know, so they can organize their books in this way, so then they get the best, write-offs that they can, and do it the right way, as not the TikTok tax way.
TikTok tax. No. TikTok jail.
Like maybe 94 to 99% of them are crazy. And then there's that 1% of a gem, but people have to figure out when they get that gem or not. Yeah. So
there's a lady I just started following on YouTube. I think her name is Jasmine or something.
Oh yeah, Jasmine Delucci?
Yeah, that's her.
Yes.
Yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah. Well, I like the real ones.
Yeah. So I watch her shorts, and she'll show somebody else's tax advice or financial advice, yeah. And then she'll go and say, well, this is not real, and it's always, she's not gimmicky or anything. She's like straight to the point. I really, really like her stuff. So let me ask you a question though. You gave the example of the sales tax.
Yes.
On your trademark. I've often wondered about, not on the trademark, but in Tennessee, there's very limited services that can also charge sales tax in the state of Tennessee. Most services, like coaching services, I'm a coach.
Right.
I can't charge sales tax. I'm not supposed to charge sales tax. But let's say I did. Let's say I did it and people paid it. Well, I wouldn't necessarily turn it in because There's no place to turn it in. So what happens in that situation? If that company that charged you sales tax, you knew not to pay it, but what are they doing with the money? Are they pocketing it, or does it go into the government?
Well, they are paying it as if they are paying the sales tax. So they are passing it through, and the government's not going to return the money.
That's the point. Yeah, so the government's like, okay, they tipped us. We're going to keep the money.
Exactly. And so for everyday people, if you charged it, even though you're not supposed to, you could potentially, one, face the consequences of charging sales tax. They'll probably tell you, hey, you're not supposed to. But two, they're just going to add it to your revenue. So it's just additional income for you, unless you pass it through to the state.
Do you happen to know, this is just a curious personal question, my accountant is in Florida.
Okay.
And I pay a flat monthly fee for their services, bookkeeping and accounting, and they charge tax on that. And
sales tax, yeah.
Or sales tax on it. And it occurred to me, it's like, should they be charging me sales tax? Because I pay for other services I don't pay sales tax on, but is it a Florida issue, or is it?
Florida doesn't have an income tax. It charges sales tax on pretty much everything.
Okay. Well, we don't have an income tax here in Tennessee, but we don't also charge tax on services. So like a haircut, there's no sales tax on a haircut, coaching services, lawn care. And again, I'm not a tax professional. You don't take my advice, but that's my experience.
It's a state-by-state thing.
Yeah.
And granted, so some people will try to, get a better deal on sales and use tax by going to another state. And it's like, no, if you go to a state that doesn't charge sales tax on this intentionally just to avoid tax and the same thing was available in your state, you could actually still be responsible for paying the tax. A lot of people don't realize those rules, and IRS is overburdened, so they may or may not catch it. But if they do, then surprise, you've got a nice bill.
So out of all the things that you've learned in your practicing of law, whether officially as an attorney or just knowing law, helping people, what's your favorite subject matter? What do you really like dealing with in terms of law?
Ooh, I honestly just like how it all plays together. So the econ, so like one thing, like I agree with Jasmine DeLucci on when she talks about like the progressive tax and how, because it's a progressive tax, your next dollar is just worth less. Law of diminishing marginal returns in economics. But oftentimes people forget that there is an additional tax. So people are not crazy when they say, oh, I'm in a new tax bracket, I'm paying more in tax. It's called inflation. And because who does the money go back to? It goes back to the government. So I like how things play together. Whether even with estate planning, corporations, people's estate plans are mixing in with all of these concepts. The tax code just helps people make their money go further. It's the JD/MBA in me. I didn't want to choose one or the other. I liked how they played together, and I realized that if you understand that nexus, then you have more control over your situation. And wealthy 1% people, the billionaire family I worked with, they knew this stuff. And if they didn't know everything, but they hired teams, but they had people advising them on it, and they knew this stuff. It gave them a lot more power with the decisions that they were making.
Yeah. Well, and when you're playing with those types of numbers, it's just makes sense that you pay attention to not giving the government one dime more than they're entitled to receive. Listen, I think taxation is theft, and that's a whole other conversation. But if we're in a situation where it is required, whether it's theft or not, like pay only what you owe. Don't pay more. Like
right.
This whole idea of paying your fair share. Everybody pays their fair share. The
rich people pay more than their fair share.
Exactly. A lot of times we pay more. I have a quick side story. In one of the businesses I used to own, my accountant made a huge mistake, and we overpaid the state of Tennessee $90,000 in sales tax that we shouldn't have had to pay. Guess what? Never got the money back.
You're never going to.
I applied for refunds, and they even agreed, yeah, you overpaid. Never gave me my money back.
Right.
They're thieves. They're thieves. Now, besides that, going back to what my point is, I love people like you because you look at this and say, look, I'm going to help you no matter how much money you've got, but I'm especially going to pay attention to the wealthy people. Make sure you don't pay a penny more than you're supposed to pay.
Correct. And also set things up correctly, because sometimes the way things are set up will determine how things play out. So for example, in the tax world, and you know this as a business owner, if you are, quote, self-employed versus having a corp, a C corp or an S corporation, that can change your taxation. And if you have, for example, just for people on the chat or podcasts who don't know what those are, is essentially, you may have a small business, you file for your limited liability company, and by default, you get money in, you subtract your expenses, what's left over, there's a 15.3%, roughly speaking, tax that you're paying for Medicare and Social Security, etc. And I can break down all the particulars, but ultimately, you pay that in addition to your actual income taxes. But if you organize a little bit differently, you could actually not only cut that tax and make part of it a write-off. Say you do what's called a small corporation or a subchapter S corporation. Essentially, you can make yourself an employee, pay yourself a reasonable salary, make some of your business income treated as what's called capital gains, long-term capital gains, which are taxed at lower rates than ordinary income. Instead of paying up to the 37% tax bracket, you're paying up to 20%. And so that's a huge difference. And especially if you can write off half of those taxes that you would pay on the self-employment tax instead of paying 15.3% extra, well, 7.5% of it or so, 7.65, ultimately gets subtracted from your actual revenue and income. And it's a one-to-one write-off. It's not a percentage like most people give to a charity, $1,000. They get $370 back if they're in the 37% tax bracket. No, this is, you pay $1,000, you get $1,000. That's deducted. So my thought is, if people can do that step proactively and know when to do that step, know what to check in advance, then you have less cleanup on the back end. Because as you note, if you pay it, you're not getting it back.
They're not giving it back. They're thieves, man. They're thieves, I'm telling you. I was in business for 13 years, maybe 12, before I realized what you just said about this S Corp thing. Because as an LLC, this is not a tax clinic, but but as an LLC, you can elect S Corp tax filing status.
Yes.
You don't have to change your
underlying
structure.
Documents, right?
You don't have to change that just to file. I only recently, I think last year, like it's just that recent, where I set up the S Corp filing, where I'm paying myself like 40 grand a year or whatever, and I'm paying W-2 income taxes on that. And then the rest distributions, where before it was 100% distributions, which I was paying taxes on all that. And it's crazy how we don't know this.
It's not taught in schools. My biggest goal is really to get this program into schools, particularly like starting with colleges and grad schools, because that's probably the closest level. Eventually have a kiddie version, because there's so many avenues that people can navigate with this stuff. And because I like fiction, I like writing stories, the artsy person in me, I have great ways of analogizing this stuff without making it. I think the biggest problem with financial literacy is oftentimes it comes across as condescending and as if no one's made mistakes. I don't pretend to. Yeah. I learned all this stuff on the job. So I didn't start off knowing it. So I don't have anything that says, oh, I'm better than anyone who doesn't. My job is, can I help you before this becomes a problem?
Well, when you went back and got your law degree, you've got a JD and an MBA. Did you go? You went to work for a couple of firms. You worked for a few firms.
Yes.
But at some point you transitioned to doing your own thing. So tell me a little bit about that transition.
So the transition started I started off at one law firm, Kirkland, and I followed a team into ropes in restructuring and doing special situations. And one of the projects I was doing was structuring a global social enterprise. So it was a company that had a combination of for-profit and nonprofit, and they're also international. And our tax team, we could only meet with them once a month, given the amount of extra deals we had going on because of COVID. They just weren't available, so I had to dive into the tax code. And all the things I was doing, paired with a senior partner had wanted me to specialize in distressed real estate. I knew nothing about real estate, except for I like houses and I like architecture. I'm like, okay, sure. So I got around the real estate guys. And they started explaining what they were doing. And I'm like, wait, I did that agreement. Wait, I'm doing this? This is what I'm doing? So that confusion, having that moment of clarity of like understanding my actual role, I think law firms do a terrible job of really communicating to people the impact that they're having. Associates are very smart. They can actually do things and they don't understand the real purpose behind them. And that moment of having that click, and then shortly after that, having a former colleague and friend of mine say, this is what I'm trying to do. And I'm like, yeah, we'll just do what our clients do. And she's like, explain. And she's like, I'll pay you to teach that. And then I taught it to her. And she was able to actually put together the structure for her business. And from that information, and then walking other people through it. And another person onboarding people in my program because they're getting frustrated with trying to navigate because, financial advisors telling them to do something. And they're doing it, but it's not going towards their actual goal. My thought is you have to connect the financial goals to the life goals. They can't just be cookie cutter independent. And it has to be structured that way. And also teach people how to start that conversation, how to do it so they can they don't have to do it themselves, but they know how to direct someone towards what they want. Because lawyers are fiduciaries, CPAs, they have professional responsibilities, but they only have it to the extent you can tell them what it is you want. You don't mention it? I want an estate plan. Okay, because everyone dies one day, sure. But no, I want the estate plan that covers me before I go to the great beyond. But you didn't know to ask that. Like, I want it for my family in the future, and I want my businesses to be doubly protected. I want to make sure that I can own and control things, but they're not in my name. So if someone sues me, well, I have nothing.
So you started teaching, you taught your friend how to do this. And was that the light bulb moment, like, ooh, I could start a business teaching other people to do this?
It was. And then I was just like, well, we'll see if there's other people, maybe if there are other people who are interested, then I could. And then it just kept coming up and it kept being relevant. And I also have a mentor. He actually has a best-selling book, and I consider him a mentor, and thank God for him. His name's James Ree. He saved Ashley Stewart from Chapter 7 bankruptcy, and he taught his colleagues there. And at the same time, he turned the whole company around using these principles. He's someone who's an MBA who worked in private equity. He understood that economics, finance, law converge, and he used that to actually propel the company's growth from Chapter 7 liquidation, second time around, no prospects, no bidders, into a company that had over a 160% return on investment. So he, in his book, Red Helicopter, talks about agency and how it's in some ways structural, that people don't have it. And definitely speaks to those concepts. And when I saw his book come out, I was like, this has been, I've spoken to him several times, but I made the connection. I was like, oh, this is ultimately what I'm teaching. Like, I already have something that teaches us systematically. So, and I've talked to him about it. And when he said he liked what I was doing and the way I was doing, was like, okay, blessing. That's good to know, because I'm trying to go forward with this.
And was that the birth of Perfectionista?
I had started and gotten everything underway before, but that was that moment where I was just like, yeah, no, I really am doing the right thing.
Yeah.
That moment of, okay, I can go full throttle at this.
So right now, how would you describe what it is that you do for the general public? What are you doing, and how would they engage with that?
Got it. So right now, I have a coaching program, one that's just more entry level for people who are curious about how I teach and how I think, and that one's just mindset work. I call mindset work because nobody really knows what the term means, a way of changing your beliefs and thoughts to align with your desired set of choices and actions.
Yep.
And I've always called it gear shifting. Whenever I needed to make a change, I need to shift gears. And so I broke that down into an acronym, an analogy, and a process. And that's an entry-level way so people can get a feel for how I teach, because ultimately, I don't leave out the behavioral element of these things. A lot of people just want the technical, but the technical influences how people behave, and how people behave influences the technical. So I teach that, and then I have a program where people can engage with me where I actually do teach all of it, the mindset work, business structures and models, how people, if they don't have a vision, how to create one, and then teaching them, because tax follows the economics, how to overlay the tax system, and then how to de-risk. Because ultimately those 4 pieces make up wealth. And then of course I can consult on this and help people with putting these things together if they're trying to do it on their own, and they can engage me that way.
Yeah. Are you doing this as an attorney or just as a consultant?
I'm doing it as a consultant, but I have my legal license, so I could technically do legal work as well. I would break that out because not everyone needs that. And, you know, I'm agnostic. I don't, in some regards, maybe it's a poor business model, maybe it's a great business model. I don't want people to need me in that way, as if I'm the only source on the street. There's plenty of attorneys who can do this job. Some more affordable, some less affordable. You may have to direct them more. They may not ask you as many questions. And, you know, that might be better for your budget.
Yeah.
And people have to be realistic. Now, an attorney like me, I'm going to want to ask questions. I want to actually get the full picture, because then I can figure out how I can actually serve them, and then serve them to, you know, better than what they hoped.
And that specialty that you're working with, you're consulting on, of course, it starts with mind shift, you know, that mindset shift, the gear shift, as you called it.
Yes.
Of understanding how things look differently when you think differently.
Correct.
But from a practical standpoint, is it really just business structure, setting up the proper estate, the living estate plan, as you talked about? Is that what it is?
Well, understanding what the options are and how they work, because you know, some people think I'll just get a trust off a LegalZoom, because they're first generation. They've never had any familiarity with it, or you know, their estate planning attorney gave them the option for $2,000 or $3,000, and you know, they had another attorney say it's about 10 to 15, but they don't know what the differences are. So I want people to actually know so they can make a conscious choice. And maybe the $10,000 to $15,000 estate plan is not where you're at right now, but you can aim for it later and start with the $2,000 plan, knowing, okay, you know, this one might have creditor protection in it, but only to the extent it, for example, will hold the money in trust, but I can't access it. I can't use the money at any point if someone's coming after me. If it comes to me, if it's distributed, that creditor can potentially get their hands on it. Versus the $10,000 to $15,000 version, your trust could have its own debit card. You could actually pay the rent directly from the trust, or your kids could. And people don't know that difference. And some people might be comfortable with the former and just say, well, you know what? I'm gonna give my kids skills. They're gonna be able to get a job. They're gonna be able to build a business. They'll get money some way. And they can hold the money until everything else gets figured out. Other people will be like, yeah, no, I don't want my kids to have to think about that. And I also don't want the situation where they could screw up the next generation. So I'm not going to distribute it. It's just going to be held in trust. I want people to be able to make their own decision, not have someone else act in their stead. I believe in agency, and I think that's what's been missing. Most people, if they were given the information, could decide for themselves what they feel comfortable with.
Who is the avatar that you're working with? What do they look like, and how much money they have? Are they business owners? Who are you working with?
Got it. For the coaching program itself, my avatar is, relatively speaking, first generation. They're in a they're professionals. So they're familiar with financial systems, concepts. In some regard, they've interacted with them, or they're leaders in their community or businesses. So they have some leadership standards, and ultimately, they're moving most of the cylinders and they're moving on all the nodules that they know. The problem is they don't know and don't understand these things, and that's a gap, and it's messing with their finances when they want to help family. They could put themselves in the wrong position by helping family either too early, or they're overpaying on taxes. They don't get a tax break for just helping family, unless, maybe they set up a side business and their business has an advisory board with family on it and they pay them. Just a thought. But they didn't know to set that up. And so my thought is they're not quite ready to make the move, or they're an entrepreneur. They already know what they want to do. They have that vision, but they don't understand. They're always dealing with a huge tax bill, surprise tax bill, something's coming up, and it's always legal. They don't understand it. And they're not sure of how to create a onboarding or offboarding plan or a succession plan. What happens if, the business is someone, maybe they're inheriting a business. How do you transition? How do you position your business to sell? How do you make it so that instead of your kids waiting for you to kick the can, like everyone's talking about the great wealth transfer when, boomers die, well, the wealthy families have already transitioned it while they're alive. Their kids aren't waiting on them to die. At least in most cases, not the ones who keep it from multi-generation to generation. So it's the, if they are wealthy, it's the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves type wealthy people, where it's a bit of a precarious situation because the older generation, they're struggling to transition. If they have a business, they could consult with me, or more affordably take the program itself and then learn some of the specifics about navigating. It's maybe changing their company to a different type, from LLC to an S Corp as necessary, why that's important, certain processes that are pretty standard to put in place that they could do. And then of course, if they have no vision whatsoever of this, they just want to be the first in their family to build, quote, generational wealth, as if that can't disappear. There's no amount of money that can't disappear if you don't put the right structures in place. Those people, they can walk through the whole program and learn, so this is what the puzzle looks like. It's like the key. You get that 1,000 piece puzzle and you see the front of the box, and you get to put together the puzzle, but you know what it's supposed to look like. Yeah. So it's a guide for people.
I love it. And this is the type of stuff I could geek out on all day, because I could say, all right, what about this? What would you do with this structure? Because some of the stuff that you're mentioning here, I'm sure for some listeners, this is the first time they've heard this ever. And I remember the first time I started hearing about some of this stuff, it was like, you can do that? I didn't know you could do that. Like just that example of the S Corp election on your tax filing is a huge game changer, and it doesn't cost anything to do that.
No.
That literally is a free.
It's a form.
It's a form. You just fill it out, turn it in, but now you have to structure it on the back end. You got to pay yourself the right way.
You have to pay yourself the right way. You have to make sure that you do it timely, or you've set yourself up if you're going to make a late election correctly. There are procedures, and they're pretty standard.
Yeah.
People could easily just be told this, and even if they forget, they went to school and they flip back through like a book. I have textbooks from school. Like, I remember there was somewhere in these pages, this topic, flip through it. Oh, this is what I do. And they could just call their advisor to help them do it. They could call an attorney. Hey, this is what I would like to do. Here's why.
Well, I think there's also an opportunity. I don't know if you thought about this, but the average attorney or CPA or wealth manager doesn't have the depth of knowledge or the breadth of knowledge that you have as a JD MBA, who's been in your, has had your experience. Like, you're almost like the attorney whisperer. You can say, listen, you keep them on your $500 an hour retainer. I'm going to show you how to make sure their system is set up right?
Yeah, I would love that. And, to work with people who already have clients. I don't want your clients. They trust you. They love working with you. But how do I help you help your clients better? Yeah,
because I've got a company, an attorney firm that I've partnered with a couple times to do some training for my mastermind, and they've helped me with a land trust that I needed to set up and some other things that I'm doing. But certainly no fault of theirs, but they've been a little bit hard to get in touch with, been hard to deal with. But they know stuff I don't need to know, that I don't know, and I'm trying to work with them. But if there were somebody like you that said, hey, this is what you need, Jason, just go to your attorney, just do this. This is the thing. I think there's a big opportunity there. I don't know, maybe not. I don't know. I think there is.
I mean, that's what I'm doing, and that's what I believe as well, because people, especially my first generation classmates, many of them are starting businesses, and they're trying to put themselves in the position to raise funds with venture, and they talk to attorneys, and they're just told what to do or what's going to happen, but they don't understand the why.
Yeah.
If people, oftentimes technical people forget that people's feelings matter, and people need to feel comfortable that what's happening is the best thing for them. And explaining this in English that they understand is something that I do, because this was all foreign language to me. I remember looking at it and I'm like, oh, this is written in Arabic or Greek. But understanding it now, it's like, oh, I have a system of relating it. For example, T accounts. People taught debits and credits. Nobody remembers which side goes on the debit side, which side goes on the credit side. Well, I write fiction. Protagonists want all the deposits they can get, debits. They don't want to be credited for anything. They want their win. So credits are L's. But your villain, you need a good villain. They need credits. They're good. Is credit. So everything on the asset side, cash flow statement, your balance sheet assets are deposits. That's your plus. Your credits are negative, and that goes to your liabilities plus equity. Your revenue, net income flows through because it wants to get credit. And that's how you do it. And if people understand that, because it makes, my villain wants credit.
So how do you define the word success? I mean, you've experienced a lot of success in your life as a corporate and as an entrepreneur. What's your, Shanan, definition of success?
My definition of success is taking those moments where things aren't going the way that you want, and that disappointment, and not turning it into resentment, transmuting it into something that's good for you and good for others. I don't care whether it's a personal situation or a financial situation. If you can create something that is a net positive in this world out of something bad, that's success.
So by that definition, do you consider yourself to be successful?
Multi-times. And trying to do it again, more and more.
I love it. I love it. Well, as we finish our conversation today, I want to give you the opportunity to think about what piece of advice would you give to the listener who's an entrepreneur, or maybe even an aspiring entrepreneur, and they just want to know how to be successful. What would you look back on your experience and what's allowed you to be successful, and then what would you encourage them to do to be successful?
I encourage people to find their gifts, whether this applies to the existing entrepreneur or the one who aspires to it. And what I mean by gift is everyone has talents, that 10% inspiration, but that 90% of that genius is what you're willing to work or perspire for. So what is that 10% inspiration? Find that, but find it towards the thing you're willing to work, even if it's against the odds, to grow. And if you're willing to find that thing, you're gonna find success, because you'll have a setback here or there, but you're like, this is worth the work. This actually fulfills me to do it. I think if people find that in everything that they do, they can ultimately navigate, even without the information. That's honestly, that's the hard part, is getting that gift and getting in line with that gift. And then getting the information on top of it. Well, you just navigate. It's like having a map. It leads you right to treasure.
That's great. Well, Shanan, thank you so much for coming to Nashville and being with me on the show today. You're such a pleasant person.
Aww.
I've enjoyed our conversation very, very much. And I congratulate you on your success, and I wish you loads more success. And I think there's probably an opportunity for us to do some stuff together. So thank you for opening up to be a part of the show. And it's just been an honor to have a conversation with you today.
Thank you. I'm honored that you would have me. Appreciate it.
Well, I want to tell everybody how to get in touch with you. So her website is Shanan Terale. I'll spell it out for those that are listening. It's SHANAN, Shanan Terale, TERALE. ShananTerale.com. She's on all the social medias: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Threads. Pearlfectionista, like perfectionist with an A on the end, but it's Pearl. So that's how I had to remember. It's like, it's perfectionista. No, it's Pearlfectionista. So you can check her out on the socials. But go check her out. And if you're a first generation wealth earner and you're trying to figure out how to turn that into generational wealth, this is a lady you need to connect with. She's got courses, opportunities, learning. She's got everything you need to make sure that you get where you need to go. But thank you, listener, for tuning in. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, we're sitting here at Smokers Abbey in Gallatin, Tennessee today. A big shout out to Josh and his team for letting us be here. But thanks for listening. Thanks for leaving a review and for subscribing if you haven't subscribed to this. But make sure you tune in again next time when I talk with yet another very successful entrepreneur about his or her journey to success. As always, I am the real Jason Duncan, and Jesus is King.
Thank you for listening to another edition of The Root of All Success with the real Jason Duncan. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, visit therootofallsuccess.com to access the show notes and other helpful resources. Follow Jason on social media at The Real Jason Duncan. See you again next time here on The Root of All Success.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.